Hello, welcome back to Sahara TV here in New York City. Once again, my name is Omoyele Shore, and as we promised, we were going to bring to you a very important discussion about Africa. This time around, it is to the extent that do white people actually think Africa is still a burden, that every white person wants to help Africans, either they're adopting African children or speaking on behalf of Africa, or telling Africans what to wear, what to eat, and how much they should get in terms of aid, and how to spend or manage their resources. You know, there are countless ways you can look at this, but there's an opportunity that presented itself recently when some kids went to Uganda and did this documentary known as Kony2012 campaign. That has now fallen apart as far as we know, because as of today, one of the co-directors or co-producers of that movie has been arrested because he had a meltdown. Apparently, he didn't prepare for the outcome of what happened. In Uganda, even when they tried to screen the movie in the area where it was made, it ended up in chaos. So we want to talk seriously about how do other people see Africans, and like we introduced earlier when we began this show, why are Africans not man enough to stand up on their own and speak for themselves and speak to the issues that affect and are important to their own existence and well-being? Why do Bono have to speak about African poverty? Why do Madonna need to go to Africa to adopt an African baby and not a baby in Alabama? These are many more the reasons why we have a very, very powerful brother in the studio today, Milton Allimadi. He's the editor-in-chief of Black Star News, and he's originally from Uganda. And as you hear directly from him any moment from now, you know, my brother here doesn't take any prisoners when it comes to African dictators and how Africans are treated or disrespected. Milton, you're welcome to Sahara TV today.
Thank you once again.
So let's start with Kony2012.
Right.
You know, if there's a word to describe Kony2012, it would be Kony, as in Kony 2012 now. What do you think motivated, you know, I won't say what motivated the movie, we already know that. Why do you think this thing became a fiasco? Why did people suddenly realize that, yes, we need to stop disrespecting Africans by telling their stories for them?
Well, I think it became a fiasco, and because of the reactions by African voices. And thank God for the internet, because in the past, when media was just dominated by a few outlets, we would not have the opportunity to challenge this misinformation campaign. So, for example, remember when the so-called explorers used to go to Africa in the 18th and 19th century, and they came back and they were writing about creatures that had two heads and all that nonsense, and they sold a lot of books, and they became legends, people who were discovering Africa. Africans did not have a voice in those days, so we could not challenge. And even in the modern era, when we have the New York Times going to Africa and then saying this is how we should perceive Africa, we didn't have the means to challenge that as well. But today, you put out a video like Kony2012. This is a propaganda campaign, because if you look at the message they're disseminating, it is completely on the same page as the message that the dictator in Uganda is disseminating, which is that the only way to defeat Joseph Kony and the Lord's Resistance Army is by more militarism. And that is also, not by coincidence, what the United States government is preaching. It is also what the Ugandan government is preaching. So it's not any coincidence now that we are obtaining WikiLeaks memos that shows that, in fact, Invisible Children is not an independent organization. They've been working all along with the United States and the Ugandan government. For example, WikiLeaks memo now inform us and let us know that the people who made 2012 were in fact letting the United States Embassy in Uganda know their intentions, that they were going to make this video basically to promote U.S. military presence and Uganda's military in going after Joseph Kony. Now, what is the problem with this? Ugandans want a negotiated settlement to this conflict that's gone on for too long now, 26 years, with people suffering in the war-affected areas. So you have Ugandan bishops, Bishop Odama, Archbishops, Ochola, all saying that we need a negotiated outcome. That's what the people in Uganda are saying. And then you have the United States and these, as you call them, these kids advocating militarism. So who should we listen to? Should we listen to the authentic voices of Ugandans representing the people who suffer, or should we listen to these kids and the U.S. administration?
Let me just quickly bring in Chioke L'Anson, who is joining us by Skype, and he has also been reacting to Kony2012. Can we bring in Chioke onto the screen, and he can tell us what motivated his own video reaction, because he made a video on YouTube as well. Do we have Chioke?
Yes, hello.
Hello, Chioke, how are you?
I'm quite all right. Thank you for having me.
Yes, we've just been listening to Milton Allimadi, who's the editor-in-chief of Blackstone News, and he's broken that down to our level to the extent that, you know, Kony2012 was some of the corniest things that have been in movies or video that's been made, at least because we Africans could react immediately because there's internet. You know, why do you think, in your own view, this fell apart very quickly? I mean, this very big lie or propaganda, as it's been called.
Yeah, well, the Kony2012 video gives us, that is, us Westerners, us Americans, the kind of narrative that we're very used to in the movies that we watch and in the entertainment that we consume. And in addition to kind of pulling our heartstrings in this really manipulative way, it also gives us a very kind of easy activity that we can undertake to then kind of satisfy ourselves and achieve kind of emotional catharsis. So it's popular because it's storytelling merged with the kind of pornography of the pain of people in Uganda and in the Congo who are suffering, who have suffered from the LRA.
So let's bring back, he's just saying that, you know, the reason that it's popular is that this is what people are used to here, as you mentioned, in Africa. You know, the rest of the world, especially Europeans, they always feel good when they're challenged to help Africans, you know, when they're given this feeling that they're serving, you know, an entire continent of billions of people.
Right.
And you know, I used to say when I was at Columbia University how it was strange that most of the kids at Columbia didn't know anything about Harlem.
Right.
But they're very quick to tell you that they want to save Uganda, they want to go and save Zimbabwe,
right.
They want to save gorillas, they want to save, you know, I mean, there was even a white lady that went to Liberia and was breastfeeding,
right.
You know, a Liberian child.
Right.
Claiming that, well, you know, the mother's breast didn't have, you know, and I imagine who was breastfeeding the child after she left.
Right.
Right,
and I'm glad you point out these examples. And these examples are very paternalistic, very denigrating, and very insulting. What separates Kony2012 from these demeaning examples is that Kony2012 can actually lead to more suffering, more deaths, and more destruction in Africa. Because it's obvious that the U.S. administration has bought into this message. Of course, the Ugandan regime, the dictatorship, would welcome more militarism and more U.S. military presence, because by being working together with the U.S. Government and U.S. military, it implies that Museveni's hands are clean, and that only Joseph Kony.
That exactly brings into the point. Where is there no Museveni 20 2012, you know.
Precisely.
You know, where is there no Abdullahi Wade 2012? Where is there no Shell 2012? Where is there no Chevron 2012? I mean, all of these people combined together kill more Africans than the LRA.
Absolutely, and that in fact is my latest editorial on blackstarnews.com, and I invite people watching now to go read that editorial. I say precisely what you just said. I said, at this point, the best thing Invisible Children can do is this: apologize for making Kony2012, which is scandalous, a scam, and make another video and show the role that the United States has played in supporting Uganda's dictator Museveni, and show the role Museveni has played in this conflict and the number of civilians that have died as a result of Museveni's own military. And then you can talk about Kony's own atrocities. And then once the global community is aware of this, we can put pressure on both of them to come to the negotiating table.
Chioke, let's go directly to the issue of the meltdown of Jason Russell yesterday has been reported. Why do you think Jason went down so fast?
Well, it's difficult to say. We don't really have the details. You know, we don't know if he was a recreational drug user beforehand. We don't know if somehow the stress of criticism got to him. I think that the only thing that we can know fairly certainly is that this incident is, once again, taking away attention from the real issues, which are the kinds of criticisms that people have been leveling at invisible children.
Interesting.
And he's right. We don't know the details, but Jason Russell knows the details of the video that he made and disseminated, and he knows, in fact, that he perpetuated a scam. He knows that Invisible Children has been working in tandem with the United States administration and the Ugandan regime to promote warfare as the only solution to go after Kony, when in fact many Ugandans are skeptical, and they know that the U.S. also has another interest, which is to have a military presence in the oil-producing part of Uganda, which is the northern part of Uganda, in South Sudan, and in Central Africa. So it's not coincidence that Invisible Children was on the same page with the Ugandan regime and the United States policy of promoting militarism in the region. I think it's quite fair to believe that Jason may now be feeling some sense of guilt if he has a conscience, and I would not be surprised if that's what might have led to the meltdown.
At the same time, that could be quite a charitable interpretation. I think one of the biggest questions concerning Invisible Children is the degree to which they have any real awareness as to what it is that they're doing.
Well, let's generally talk about, you know, the race aspect of this. You know, like we mentioned earlier, when is the white man going to get over the burden of guilt about Africa? You know, why can't they just step up on there and say, look, we've done slavery to you, we've mismanaged and exploited you and your resources, we've polluted your rivers, we've militarized your lives, and just say, look, you know, we're going to stop doing this so that we don't have to send our kids to be Peace Corps members, so that we don't have to send our kids to go and make movies about your children and suffering. Because what is not addressed in all of this scam is that, you know, the gun that is killing somebody in Uganda today, in northern Uganda, in Sierra Leone, in Liberia, in Nigeria, is not made anywhere in Africa. The bullets are not made anywhere in Africa. All of the weapons that are involved in the conflicts are not made anywhere in Africa. As a matter of fact, Africans don't drink the chocolates made out of their cocoa. They can't afford it. They can't wear the diamond rings at their weddings that are made of the diamonds made out of Africa. Most of them can't afford the cell phones that are made out of the coltan, out of the Congo. And, you know, most Africans can't even afford anything that's taken out of Africa. We can't afford the gas that is taken out of the soil in Nigeria. You know, the only thing we are left with is pollution and, of course, the kind of black leadership that perpetuates the suffering that have been brought on Africa by way of this exploitation we're talking about. So when is the white world going to say, look, we're sorry for doing this to you, we're sorry for stealing your resources, making your people slaves, and supporting the dictators that continues to put you in this? When should we start that conversation, Jason? I'm sorry, I apologize. Chioke, you're not Jason. Or do you think it's a conversation that is necessary? I mean, does it make sense what I just said?
Yeah, well, look, I think that the kinds of issues that you raise will, unless we do something with regards to our own campaigns of awareness, the kinds of issues that you raise will never really be addressed in the global media to the degree that something like the Kony2012 video can, gain popularity. Mainly because you are challenging the general Western power structure and the issues that you raise. And the Kony2012 video does not challenge that power structure, but rather it acquiesces to it. It assumes it as law in order for us to, go about and do our charitable action out in the world, even when it includes, enlisting the help of the military and, encouraging the militarization of Uganda. So while you're right, the campaign to bring the kinds of things that you raise can only come, I think, from Africans themselves. I doubt that we'll be seeing many Christians in California taking up the cause against Western capitalism and imperialism.
Wow. Let me ask you this question. Also, the flip side of this coin is that haven't we blamed the whites for too long for our wars, when in fact we could have addressed some of these issues without just saying forever that, the white people kept us down? Because now we're seeing more black people of our skin, right, who are responsible for some of the exploitation. They are responsible for the oppression and the killings and the murders and assassinations. And so many of them actually become exploiters themselves of their own people. So many of the traditional institutions are still enslaving people. There are still slave laborers all over Africa who are hired by African big men themselves.
Right. No, I agree with you totally. But I think we are doing it. I think we are now engaged in doing that. A show like this, for example, we are challenging not only the U.S., we're challenging the invisible children. We're challenging African agents that they use to perpetuate this scam and continued exploitation. We're challenging dictators such as Museveni. We're challenging dictators such as Kagame in Rwanda, and these are all U.S. Very close U.S. allies, and they facilitate the continued exploitation of Africa. Let's look at the example of the Congo, for example. The U.S. is still allies with Uganda and Rwanda, and these two countries invaded Congo. It was welcome initially because it got rid of dictator Mobutu, but then they decided to stay on and to turn Congo into a killing field. Up to 6 million people died. But you don't see that sufficient pressure from the United States, because at the same time, Western companies were illegally stealing resources from Congo. And they tolerate that at the cost of 6 million Congolese lives. In fact, it got so bad that Congo referred the matter to the International Court of Justice, which found Uganda liable in 2005 to what would amount to war crimes in the Congo. And then when the Congo referred the matter to the International Criminal Court to try and get Museveni indicted, Museveni called then Secretary General Kofi Annan and said, please block this investigation. This is in the Wall Street Journal, June 8, 2006. Anybody can go and read it. Annan did say that he didn't have the power to block the investigation, but it seems that somebody did block it. He's not been indicted for these crimes. We tolerate that, meaning if you can sacrifice 6 million African lives just for mineral resources and find that acceptable, it means that it is up to us to elevate the value of our lives and fight for our own dignity, because I agree with Chuck totally. Nobody's going to do it for us. And it's these kind of platforms that you have here today, these kind of conversations that will challenge the establishment.
Chioke, one of the things I come across very easily when I go speak in colleges here in the U.S. churches, community groups, is that Actually, U.S. citizens come up to you and say, "What can we do for you?" Um, which I always find insulting because I will remind them that they need to help themselves. And one of it is to curb their reckless consumption of resources, especially things they don't need. And because part of the problem of the world is that people in this part of the world just eat too much. They consume too much. And they haven't curbed their appetite for things they don't need. You find out people, including myself, driving cars that are bigger than can take more than one person. But I always excuse myself because oil is taken from Nigeria, and I want to burn some of it in my lifetime because I've never had actually a gas station, even though I was born in the oil producing region. But that was on a lighter note. But what can Africans really do other than just fantasizing on Facebook? Because this struggle has to go beyond just liking and unliking Kony2012. People have to put their feet onto the ground. How can Africans organize? How can we get over the several barriers that so many of them artificial, so many of them we created ourselves? Because I think our biggest problem is that we're just so fearful of fear, to act. How can Africans get over this and look their oppressors both at home and in the West in the face and say, you know what, we're tired of this nonsense?
It's a big question, and unfortunately, since I'm quite unfortunately not an African, I don't think that I have good answers. However, I do think that the realm of social media is a start. Access to internet, while certainly not as widespread in Africa as it is in America, is nevertheless present, and there are avenues for us, especially in light of the popularity of the Kony2012 video. There are at least people out there who are willing to listen. And so there's the general project of trying to kind of change the minds or alter or shift the perceptions of, Americans and Westerners and people who very often perpetrate things upon Africa that can be, bad, and sometimes bad, admittedly unintentionally. However, the grand question of what's to be done, what Africans are to do, I nevertheless feel can only be answered by Africans.
But I like Chioke's response. He's right in terms of the impact we can make with social media. For example, his response to Kony2012, and then we had the response of the young Ugandan journalist Rose Bell, whose video response was viewed by more than 1 million people, and that also I think has some impact in influencing people here in the so-called mainstream media and maybe some people in the administration. So we can elevate these kind of conversations and direct people in a certain direction. And also this exposes the irresponsibility of the so-called mainstream corporate media. How do you have Jason Russell on shows like MSNBC or Good Morning America, and you don't have an African voice present to at least, number one, augment what he's saying or challenge what he's saying? So mainstream media are just as responsible for perpetuating the Kony2012 scam.
Well, no, I thought Bono and Judge Clooney are, African representatives on the shows. Yes, but do you think internet? By the way, Chioke, just to let you know, there are more cell phone users in Nigeria today than are in Canada. So we're getting there. But do you think there's somehow a level playing field now with independent media? I mean, with what independent media is doing, or what I call disruptive media, which is what we're doing now. We are bypassing the MSNBCs of this world, but we're reaching Africans who needs to hear the message. Do you think this is going to be on for a while, or don't you see them coming after even independent media or disruptive media in such a way that perhaps the next time, maybe in the next 10 years, every internet will be controlled such that only MSNBC can actually do live streaming?
No, I think that's going to be difficult. I think we will see authentic, genuine rebellions again if they should try to do that. In terms of, I think the impact of media such as yours, such as mine, such as Chioke's and other outlets is going to become increasingly more significant. But in terms of what will they do, I'll give you an example, and this is an example that I think I discussed with you before. We were very critical of the U.S. Role and NATO's role in Libya. We thought if that was a civil war, it should not be the role of the West to come and determine the outcome of that civil war. In fact, we pushed for the African solution, which Gaddafi had agreed to have a ceasefire, a settlement, and to have open elections monitored by the international community. The West rejected that. Libya is now a chaotic, far much worse condition than Afghanistan. Now, I think somebody was so concerned by some of the editorials we wrote, critical of the U.S. administration, critical of the New York Times for promoting that war aggressively on its editorial pages. In September last year, there was an occasion where we could not access our website for 3 days. By the time we managed to access our website, our last editorial, which was most critical of the war, had been deleted. So it shows you the impact that we have, and it shows you to what degree they will go to try to push back. I mean, you think about it, that you can actually publish an editorial, and outside, a third party can go to your host company that is hosting your website and get somebody there without your authorization to delete an editorial critical of U.S. policy. That should be scaring, and it should be a wake-up call to everybody in independent media. And when it happens, as it did in this case, we need to know, everybody know about it, because that's the only way we can also protect ourselves.
Well, Chioke, you made actually a video response to Kony2012, and that's how we got to meet you. Do you see a situation where people like you might be denied the opportunity of, just say what you like on YouTube in the near future? Or how do you think that will play out in view of what the individual powers have come to become a challenge in mainstream authorities in the media?
Well, I think that while social media and putting out videos and those kinds of things are tremendously important, that there nevertheless has to be a moment where all of the parties that are criticizing and being criticized have to come together, which is why I'm working with a lawyer and an aid worker to put on a conference in which we invite invisible children to come and have a forum with people like you and me, people who are concerned about this thing, away from the kinds of dark spaces of retreat that the internet can unfortunately also provide.
I agree. I think.
I think also we should let our viewers know that we did invite Peter Mwanga, who is a Uganda representative of Invisible Children, to this show, and at the last minute he cancelled on us. So we are rescheduling him for next week. Yes, absolutely. As long as they don't bring a cocktail of drugs to those conferences, we should be fine with it. But so let me wrap up here, actually, and thank you, brother, for Milton, for coming, and Chioke for coming. And I hope we continue to discuss some other issues in the future as to how Africa can gain real independence, because it's obvious that the Sharia that happened in the 60s was not for Africans. Right. It was not independence.
Especially when 3 kids can hijack U.S. foreign policy.
Exactly.
Uganda.
Can you imagine? Just 3 kids with a camera, a cell phone, and just a bag of cocaine hijacked U.S. policy. And on that note, we're going to call it quit for now. And we hope you'll be back with us next time. And it's still SaharaTV, and we should be back shortly. Continue the program. Don't go away.